Hey there friends on YouTube, my name is Roger with Electronics and Gadgets. If this is your first time here, thanks for stopping by. Hit the like and subscribe please, and if you've been here before, thank you. The next item I'd like to discuss and explain is how the M1 chip in the Macs works and how it works with the other apps. I've done a previous video on the Apple M1 Macs, primarily the MacBook Pro and the MacBook Air laptops. I'm going to put a link in the upper right corner to that video so you can see some of the workings on the Mac in that. And this video I want to get a little more in depth on compatibility and just basically how it works. As a system on a chip, SoC, the M1 integrates several different components, including the CPU or Central Processing Unit, the GPU, Graphics Processing Unit, Unified Memory Architecture or the RAM, Neural Engine, Secure Enclave, the SSD or the hard drive controller, Image Signal Processor, the encode and decode engines, the Thunderbolt controller with USB 4 support, and more, all of which power the different features in the Mac. Prior to now, Macs have been used multiple chips for the CPU and the I/O and security, but Apple's effort to integrate these chips is the reason why the M1 is so much faster and more efficient than prior Intel chips. The unified memory architecture that the Apple has included is also a major factor because of all of the technologies in the M1 chip are able to access the same data without having to swap between multiple pools of memory. It's, for example, like having all your papers in front of you on a table versus having a paper in one room and the next room and the next room. It makes a big difference on speed when everything is right in front of you. So what's different about the M1? Unlike Intel chips built on the x86 architecture, the Apple Silicon M1 uses an ARM-based architecture, much like the A-series chip that Apple has been designing the iPhones and iPads for years now, more than likely that's in your current phone or iPad. The M1 chip is the most powerful chip that Apple has created to date, and it is similar to the A14 chip in the latest iPhone and iPad Air models, built on a 5nm process by Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC. TSMC builds all of Apple's chips and has done so for many years. Intel comparisons. When it comes to the CPU performance, the M1 beats out even the highest end chips used in Intel Apple's notebooks lineup. The M1 chip has the fastest single core performance of any Mac, and the multi-core performance isn't too far off from many of Apple's desktop machines. Apple is still selling the Intel 13-inch MacBook Pro and Mac Mini models, and performance-wise, the M1 versions of these Macs offer much faster CPU speeds. It's not a good idea right now to buy a non-M1 version of any of Apple's computers. It's the same time it's inferior performance and less compatible with x86 apps, and the option to run Windows is a concern, which I'm going to discuss later. Other Macs in Apple's lineup will be transitioning to Apple Silicon chips in the future, which is something to keep in mind when considering to purchase. At this time, Apple's higher-end notebooks and desktops still offers superior GPU performance, but that will change quickly in the future when the new versions of Apple Silicon chips debut. M1 security features. Intel Macs have a built-in T2 chip that handle the security and other features on the Macs, but with the M1 chips, that functionality is built right in, and a secondary chip is not required. The M1 has a built-in secure enclave that manages Touch ID and a storage controller with AES encryption hardware for SSD performance hard drive that's faster and more secure. So, how do the apps run on the M1 Macs? Because the M1 chip is using different architecture, again ARM, Apple has built tools to allow developers to create universal app binaries that run flawlessly on both Apple Silicon and Intel chips. Plus, it has developed the Rosetta 2 translation layer that allows x86 chips to run on the M1 chip. Rosetta 2 is a re-imaging of Rosetta, the feature that allowed PowerPC apps to run on Intel-based Macs back in 2006 when Apple swapped to Intel from PowerPC. With Rosetta 2, apps designed for Intel machines will continue to run on M1 Macs with some limited performance compromises. For the most part, apps will run similarly to both Intel and M1 Macs due to the performance improvements introduced in the M1. Everything should function as normal when transitioning to M1 Macs, and over the course of a few years, most popular Mac apps will likely be built to specifically run on the M1 Macs natively. Right now, there's one major compromise when choosing an M1 Mac, and that's Windows support. M1 Macs can run iPhone and iPad apps as well as Mac apps, so long as the app developers make them available on the Mac, which most I've found are in the App Store. There used to be a way to sideload iOS apps on the M1 Mac, but that functionality was removed in January of 2021. Also, I wanted to add I'm currently using an app called Parallels and an ARM-based version of Windows 10 to emulate the Windows 10 operating system. So far it's working great and flawless, and will probably be the subject of another video. As for compatibility of apps, as of January 2021, everything I personally use is very compatible, and most is actually natively M1. For a complete listing, you can go to, and I'm going to put a link up that shows all the different apps and if they're using Rosetta 2, if they're native, or if they're not compatible. Another subject I wanted to touch on with the M1 is the browser compatibility. The new version of Safari for the Apple Silicon or for the M1 Macs at the moment will reportedly consume less power. As a result, Mac laptops will be able to run for longer when Safari is being used without requiring constant charging. Apple Page also mentions the battery improvements by saying, quote, "It developed to run specifically on Apple devices, so it's geared to make the most out of your battery life and deliver long-lasting power." I found that statement to be very true on a lot of the apps I run, and when I can, I try to stay, because I have so many different Apple devices, I want to stay in the Apple ecosystem, so I tend to keep all my apps that I have Apple based, so everything runs smoother. Other competitors in the web browser market like Chrome, Google Chrome, and Mozilla Firefox have also been optimized for the new Apple Silicon Macs. Apple says users should select, quote, Mac with Apple chip option when downloading the browser on an M1 Mac. So that's my overview on the M1 chip, Apple chip, and how it works. I hope you found my video to be helpful. Thank you for being here. Please click like and subscribe to my channel. Leave me a comment below. And until next time, I'm out.